state of North Carolina. Forward together, not one step back. 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 Let's make some noise. I want everybody who is not an educator to put your hands together in appreciation for those who are, and let them know how much we love them and appreciate the job that they're doing. It's just a shame that some folk in Raleigh cannot appreciate the fact that were it not for an educator, they wouldn't have the little bit of education that they have to be able to read this stuff that they're doing. We're here today because some in Raleigh have chosen to put party ahead of people. But were it not for the people of North Carolina, this is what makes this state great. It is not any individual party. It is not the Republican Party. It's not the Democratic Party. It's not any other party, but it is the people of North Carolina that make this a great state. And we, the people, demand that you give our state back. 50 years ago, in Washington, D.C., on this very day, over 250,000 Americans came any way that they could get there. Buses, trains, catching rides, hitchhiking, so that they could stand together and send a message that has resonated over 50 years. Normally we ask for a moment of silence in reverence, but today I want to ask us to give some thunderous applause to all of those who 50 years ago stood so we could be where we are right now. Let's make some noise.
Today, Dr. King and others led a march on Washington with a dream in their heart. And today, I would like to challenge all of us to do the same, to march together and continue to march together with our dreams in our hearts, and to march for full equality without limitations. Forward together. Forward together.
Not one step back.
The way we started, we got to make sure that our minds and our hearts are tugged. So it's this one particular quote by Marianne Williamson and later said by Nelson Mandela, and it says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." We ask ourselves, Greensboro, who are we not to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, or fabulous? Actually, who are we not to be? So that's the mantra that we are going to move forward with. Now, we know the General Assembly and several legislators are purposely implanting acts to disenfranchise the student voice and also other minority groups within North Carolina. But we are going to say no, because we have always been a community to come together and rise together on issues that are important to us, issues that are important to our students. They say that the youth don't come out in numbers. I say they have been wrong, because A&T came down with the force. Bennett Bells came down with the force. We saw UNCG come down with the force. So the students are here. We will continue to fight. They will not take our precincts off of our campus, because we're going to come on in numbers. They will not. So I say unto you, Greensboro, we must continue to join in the fight. Continue to stay prayed up. Continue. We can't stop. We have to keep going. Because after all, we have been a people for years, 400 years of repression, civil rights movement, a people of great resilience. So we will bounce back.
We have assembled from every corner and corridor of our community and this electoral district, simultaneously with other districts across our state. Although our legislators are now in recess, we come to say that you can recess, but you can't hide.
We have come here today on this 50th anniversary to commemorate what our forebearers 50 years ago to this day declared in terms of their passion, in terms of their dream, and in terms of their position on issues that affect us all. We come here today to commemorate their dedication and their determination, their blood, their sweat, and their tears. We come here today from our unique perspectives and positions in our community. And though we have unique goals and objectives for ourselves individually and organizationally, there are some common threads that link us all together. And so we gather here today, 50 years later, to commemorate our mothers and fathers, our sisters and brothers of all stripes who said, we're not going to take it anymore.
Ready to stand up, speak out, fight on. I am Mark Jewell, and a public school teacher and vice president of the North Carolina Association of Educators, who was jailed for justice July the 22nd, 2013. And on behalf of the 95,000 teachers and most certainly our 1.5 million public school children, I bring you greetings, and it is great to come home to Greensboro, where we are standing on this historic day to honor the continuation of Dr. King's dream. Because when you come to Greensboro, you stand on hallowed ground. This is the battleground of our nation's independence. The corridor of the Underground Railroad and the birthplace of America's civil rights movement. And before there was a March on Washington, there was the March to Woolworths. And there is no better place to stand up, to speak out, and to fight on against the dismantling of North Carolina's greatest civil right, our public schools. But as we stand in the broad daylight of this beautiful day, in this historic city, on this great occasion, a dark storm has swept over our Carolina blue skies, reversing the 50 years of progress. I am here with a clear but simple message from NCAE. Teachers are outraged at the destruction of North Carolina's public school system from this current administration and the majority General Assembly. And we are here to tell the truth and to set the record straight. There is a claim that money was added to North Carolina public schools. That is simply untrue. One only needs to look at the budget to see that the cuts to the classroom are clear. Governor McCrory has written North Carolina schools a check stamped in red with insufficient funds.
50 years ago on this very day, we marched to Washington, D.C., demanding jobs for our people. We marched for the right to eat at lunch counters, to stay in hotels, to live in any neighborhood that we wanted to, and the right to sit at the front of the bus. Our economic focus 50 years ago was for fair treatment, fair opportunities as employees, the right to spend our money as we please and where we please. We were fighting for our civil and our human rights. Today, 50 years later, the fight is no longer about sitting at an integrated lunch counter, but to be able to afford the meal when we sit at that lunch counter. No longer do we fight to sit at the front of the bus, but we fight now to own those buses. No longer do we fight to be able to live in any neighborhood. Now we fight to have the economic empowerment and the economic capacity to live in any neighborhood that we can afford to live in. And it's a different fight now. Our fight now is not just for civil rights, C-I-V-I-L, but silver rights, S-I-L-V-E-R, economic empowerment. We need to send our young people to college, not only to get a good education and get a good job, but we should also send them to college to study entrepreneurship, to learn how to start their own business, to become employers and not just employees. We can own our own businesses, our own corporations, and support our own neighborhoods and leave an economic legacy for the next generation that will come after us. The new struggle, the new fight is for civil rights and economic empowerment. Then and only then, we can join hands in singing that old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last.
Last night, Dr. William Barber said, "The dream has power when there's a nightmare." We have an environmental nightmare right here in North Carolina right now. The legislature made it easier for Governor McCrory's former employer, Duke Energy, to contaminate our groundwater with coal ash pollution at the Blues Creek Power Station right here in our district. That's a nightmare. Think about what our city went through with the White Street landfill. The legislature has made it harder for communities to make regulatory changes for landfills near their neighborhoods. That's a nightmare. The legislature combined two agencies that help protect our water quality, including the water we drink and use to bathe our children and our grandchildren. And then they slashed millions of dollars from the budget of the agency that was left. That's a nightmare. The legislature weakened the ability of our cities and counties to enact environmental and public health protection regulations as they see fit. That's a nightmare. The legislature wants to weaken disclosure rules so companies don't have to tell us what kind of toxic chemicals they're pumping into the ground, our ground, when they start fracking. That's a nightmare.
I watched the commemoration of the March on Washington this weekend, and although progress has been made, our work is far from over. Yes, we have representation in business, in our high courts, even in our White House. Yes, we have judges, lawyers, doctors, even local elected officials. But much of what was instituted 50 years ago is being wiped away. Allowing this to continue dishonors our past leaders and threatens the future of our daughters and our sons. Post-Trayvon, post-Jena 6, and now the current attack on the Voting Rights Act shows us that our work is far from over. I am not black, I am not gay, I'm not disabled, I'm not an immigrant, but any attack on these is an attack on me.
At a time when North Carolina has the country's 50th worst employment rate and the economy is struggling, our elected officials have decided to pass some of the worst legislation we have seen in decades hurting working people. And that is wrong. One of the main bills that passed involved the changing of North Carolina unemployment benefits. This law makes qualifying more difficult. Weekly maximum payments dropped from $535 to $350, and it ended the emergency compensation program in North Carolina. According to North Carolina Justice Center, by not receiving those federal funds, 600 million people in North Carolina, 600 million in federal benefits would not come to North Carolina, and that is wrong.